Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of my Beginner to Pro Unreal Engine 5 tutorial series, where we're going to continue our hard work on the interaction UI that you see now. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So we're going to pick up right where we left off last time, and we're going to add in a couple of includes. So the Kismet trace utils and the input comp CCS. And we're adding those in because we're going to need them, and you'll see why later. And then we're going to scroll down a bit here and paste in some code, and this will be our attempt interaction function. And you'll see the first check we perform is if we have a current receiver component that we can interact with. Because if we don't, then we might as well just return false and let the caller know that there's nothing to interact with. And then we're going to call our determine interaction key function and make sure that that key isn't empty. And then after that, we can execute the interaction on the server and then return true to let the caller know that everything worked. And that's it for our attempt interaction function. And we're going to move down here and paste in a slightly different debug message. And the only change is that we're changing the amount of time that the message is displayed for to 2 seconds. And then we're going to move down into our process closest interaction and make a few changes here. So we'll paste in some code, and I'll go to the top of the new code. And as you can see, we're breaking off based off of if we already have a current receiver. And if we do have one, we need to loop through the hit results of the trace that we were doing previously and return out if one of the results is still that current receiver. Because that basically just tells us that we're still able to interact with it, so no need to change it. And then if we make it past the evaluation, that tells us that we lost our current receiver. And then we want to stop our potential interaction and call that function on the receiver. And don't worry that the function isn't defined yet. We haven't gotten to the receiver comp yet, and it will be defined when we get to it. And we're going to scroll down a bit here and get rid of that redefinition at the top and just get rid of this and make sure we're defining that component every time through the loop. It just makes it less prone to errors, so that's always good. And just a little cleanup from what we did a couple of times ago. And now we're going to add in the case in our looping through the interaction keys to check if it's interactable with a key press. So as you can see, we're calling that function that we defined earlier on the interface. And first we're get and checking the input comp ref. And then we're calling that get input action key name for interact. And if the key name is none, then we're just going to return out because clearly the key was not expected. And then at the end, we need to save our current receiver and then try to start a potential interaction. And then we're going to put that Boolean flag to true for be performed interaction so that we know we performed an interaction and we can break out of the loop. And we're going to scroll down a bit here and paste in our determine interaction key function. And we'll start at the top. And first we want to check if the receiver is valid, and if not, just return empty. And then we're going to get the keys for the receiver using the function on the receiver component. And after that, we're going to find the keys that the receiver and seeker have in common. That's what I mean by intersection there. And so basically, if it contains the loop key, then we're going to place it in the intersection keys. And then after that, we're going to check to make sure we don't have no intersection keys. And if we have no intersection keys, then just return out. And then we'll check for the case that we just have one key with the intersection. And if that's the case, then just return that key, because after this, we're going to get into the priority sorting, and that isn't necessary, assuming that there's just one key. And then we have the sort for the interaction keys priority right there. So as you can see, we're using that parameter that we defined in the last one in the header file. And then we're returning the first key in the sorted intersection keys as the result of that priority sort. And now would be a good time to like the video and leave a comment, because it really helps me out in the YouTube algorithm. So if you take the time to do that, I greatly appreciate it. But moving on here, we'll scroll down to the bottom and paste in our get and check for the input comp. And as you can see, it's just standard stuff. We're checking to make sure that we already have it. And if we don't, we try to get it and return the result, just like all the other get and check functions that I've shown you guys so far. And sorry to jump around a bit and confuse you guys, but I found this bug as I was testing, so I'm going to go back and fix it now. So we have this ECC engine trace channel 2 here that we've been using the entire time. And surprise, surprise, it's been wrong the entire time. It's supposed to be ECC game trace channel 2, not engine trace channel 2. So that is why all of our collisions haven't been working. And I just have to say, I'm a little embarrassed how long it took me to figure this out. I spent a lot of time at debugging this, and it turned out to be a very simple solution, which is good in the sense that I fixed it, but bad because it took me so long to find something so simple. And yeah, just go into the default engine.ini and make sure you're grabbing the right collision like I did here. And then the other thing is we have this zero check there, and we need to put that after where we check the current receiver. And the reason we want to do this, I found out while testing, is that the current receiver will not be cleared if we aren't looking at anything to interact, because it hits that zero check and just returns out instead of doing what it's supposed to. And after we make those fixes, we'll move on to the receiver comp ccs.h, and we'll add in a couple of includes to interfaces we don't have defined yet. So don't worry about the little red squigglies. They'll go away once we define the interfaces. And then we're going to add in a couple of forward declarations there. So one will be for widget component and one will be for user widget CCS interaction. So that's good there. And now we're going to have to add in the interfaces that we haven't defined yet that the receiver comp is going to need. So again, don't worry about the red underlines. They'll go away eventually when we define the interfaces. And on another note, notice that we have now 3 interfaces on this component. And that's something to remember, right? We can add as many interfaces as we want. So there's really no downside to using them, and that's why I use them so heavily. They make things a lot cleaner and more efficient throughout the code. So definitely use interfaces when you can. And speaking of those interfaces, we're going to add in a couple of overrides to functions we defined in there. And the first is that get is interactable with key press. And then we have the get interaction keys. So just as a reminder, we declared both of these in the interaction interface, and we're just overriding them so we can implement them as we see fit for the receiver comp. And again, that's another reason why interfaces are so valuable, is we can just very easily override these functions and make them mean different things depending on the class that we attach them to. And next, we're going to scroll down a little bit to our add interaction key, where we'll add in that parameter for B need key press because we updated that in the interface. So now we obviously need to update it in the subclass, or else we'll get an error. And besides that, the function won't work the way that we need it to if we don't add that parameter. So now we're all good. We added the comment as well, so we're ready to move on. And now we're going to scroll down a bit into the end of the public section and add in some functions for starting and stopping potential interaction. So first we have the input icon interface functions, and this is just going to have this one function on it that gets the on update input icon delegate. So we're going to be updating this UI based on these delegate functions, and I'll get more into how that works next time. But just know for now that this is just a simple getter for the delegate that's going to be used to update the UI. And then we have the next one is kind of the same thing, where we have a different type of delegate for that different type of UI, and it's a getter for that as well. And then we'll scroll down a little bit, and you can see at the top we have that get on update subtext delegate. So you'll see in the next one that our text widget is going to have two different types of text, and that's why it needs two different delegates to handle the updating of the widget. And then we have our start stop potential interaction functions. And this is going to take in an interaction key and an owner reference. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to start the potential interaction on our end, which will be used to make that UI pop up that I've been showing off in the intro. And we'll also know who called the function based on that second parameter. And then we have the stop potential interaction. So this will happen when the seeker comp can no longer see the receiver comp that this function is bound to. And for now, all it'll be doing is hiding that interaction UI. And now we'll scroll down a little bit here, and we're going to add in a bit of a temporary solution. I don't typically like doing this, but we need this here to avoid errors in begin play that will occur if we don't have this timer. In the future, we're going to make a nice clean start level function on the game mode that'll handle all this properly. But for now, just a little delay is going to be perfect to prevent those errors. And you'll see more about that next time when I go into why these errors are occurring in begin play. And then we'll scroll down a bit here into our components, and we want to declare our widget component. And this is going to be used to display and kind of be a container for the interaction widget that we're going to be attaching to this component. And then we'll scroll down a bit here and declare some more settings. So as you can see, we have our interaction text there. So that's what we're going to show on the widget text when it's triggered. And we want that to be blueprint accessible. And then we have our widget position offset. And that's how much we want to artificially offset the widget's position. So you'll see more about how that works once we get into the .cpp next time. And then we have the widget position update distance. And this again will make more sense once we get into moving the widget in the next one. And then we'll scroll down a bit and add in a parameter. And this is going to be our array keeping track of what keys need a key press. And then we're also going to add in a replicated variable for that the new interaction key needs a key press. And that again is kind of similar to the way we did the interaction keys, where we don't want to be replicating the entire array all we need to replicate is this one variable, and it'll save us a lot of network bandwidth, which is something you always want to do when possible. And then last but not least, we're going to add in our references that we're going to need now. So first we'll have our user widget CCS interaction, and you'll see why that's important in the next one. And then we finally have our potential interaction actor that we've been referencing in the seeker component. And notice that we protect both of these by a uProperty tag. And again, very important to make sure these references don't get blown away by the garbage collector. And with that, we're going to call it a day for today. Sorry, this went a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but I really wanted to power through that receiver comp.h so we can get right into the CPP when we start the next one. So with all that being said, thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.